From historic finds to history in the making, this is your Numismatic News Roundup. If you missed the release of the Mayflower Compact Quarter, don't make the same mistake twice, because the next release is about to drop, and it's likely to go just as fast. The US Mint is releasing the second 2026 Semiquincentennial Quarter on March 27, and this one shifts the focus straight into the Revolutionary War. The design centers on a Continental Army soldier at Valley Forge, and this isn't a victory scene. It's actually one of the lowest points in the war. After the loss at the Battle of Brandywine, Washington's troops regrouped at Valley Forge, dealing with brutal winter conditions, disease, and serious shortages. So this coin is really about survival and resilience, not triumph as such. On the obverse, you've got George Washington using the modern portrait by Chief Engraver Joseph Menner, which ties the whole historical theme together. Now here's where things get a little tight, as the Mint is limiting these pretty heavily. Just 5,200 two-roll sets at $56 and 3,100 100-coin bags per facility at $63. Plus, there are also order limits, so even if you're ready, you can't just grab unlimited quantities. And if the last release was anything to go by, these can disappear fast. So if you're planning to pick these up, then set the remind me alert now and be ready at noon on release day, because waiting even a few minutes could be the difference between getting one and missing out again. Alright, this next story is a little bit different, because it's not about a coin as such, it's actually about the start of a story. The Germania Mint just launched the new 2026 series called Bödvar Saga, and instead of a standalone design, it is a full narrative that unfolds coin by coin. The first release is titled Loss, and right away you can tell the tone they're going for. Dark, cinematic, and very character-driven. It follows a Norse warrior named Bödvar Bjarki, but this isn't a simple hero story. His origins are tied to a tragic loss, forcing a major turning point in his life. Not a victory. As his journey unfolds, he doesn't just become a warrior, he becomes something closer to legend. So instead of collecting a single coin, you're basically collecting pieces of a larger story. And that's the shift here. Private mints are starting to lean into narrative collecting, where the appeal isn't just the metal content, but the progression from one release to the next. The debut coin is a 1-ounce 4/9 silver uncirculated with mintages around 10,000 pieces. Plus, there are copper versions and ultra high relief editions for collectors who want something more visual. But the real question is, does this kind of storytelling actually make a series more collectible in the long term? Because if collectors do buy into the story early, finishing the set suddenly becomes a lot more compelling. And if this release is anything to go by, Germania is clearly betting that the story-driven coins are the future. Now, this next release might look simple at first, but there's actually some very interesting tech behind it. Germany has released its latest coin in the Return of the Wild Animals series, and this one features the European bison, also known as the Wisent. And this isn't just a random animal choice either. The Wisent was once completely extinct in the wild, but over time it was successfully reintroduced. So the coin is really about recovery and conservation, not just about wildlife. But here's where things get a little more modern. This coin actually includes a built-in digital authentication feature. So instead of only relying on security elements, you can verify the coin using your smartphone, which is something that we're seeing a lot more of these days, especially with higher-end issues like this. It is struck from an eighth of an ounce of 4/9 fine gold, with a mintage set around 82,000 pieces. Orders open on March the 18th and run through to April the 8th, with actual release dates scheduled later in the year, around October. So the question here is, are collectors more interested in the gold itself or the added tech and storytelling behind it? Because this feels like another shift in how modern coins are being designed. Speaking of upcoming releases, if you're watching the Royal Australian Mint, there are a couple of releases on the horizon that are worth keeping an eye on. They've just previewed 2 upcoming coins, both tied to significant moments of remembrance. The first is a 50-cent uncirculated coin marking the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Kopyang. This was a major Korean War engagement back in 1951, where Australian, Canadian, and New Zealand forces held off a much larger Chinese offensive. So it's one of those moments that carry a lot of historical weight, especially for the Anzac nations. And alongside that, they've also announced a Dawn service coin leading up to Anzac Day on April 25th. So again, these aren't just standard releases. They're tied pretty closely to commemoration and national identity. Both of these are still listed as coming soon, so definitely ones to watch, but not quite ready to grab just yet. Speaking of discoveries, this next story is a great reminder that some of the most interesting coins are the ones nobody's seen in over 1,000 years. During development work in Leicester, archaeologists uncovered a small hoard of Roman coins, and the context around it is what makes these coins really interesting. We're talking about around 30 coins dating back to the 4th century, but they weren't just scattered randomly. They were deliberately placed in a pit, which immediately raises the question, why were they hidden? Because this was a time when the Roman Empire was going through major instability, political shifts, economic uncertainty, the kind of environment where people start burying valuables. So this could have been someone trying to protect their wealth and never coming back for it later. But that's only a part of the story, as the excavation itself has uncovered way more than just the coins. Roman buildings, pottery kilns, even an infant's burial, plus medieval structures layered on top of that. So what you're seeing here isn't just a hoard, it's a snapshot of multiple eras stacked in one location. And with the coins still being cleaned and studied, there's a good chance we don't even have the full picture yet, which means this one is one of those finds we'll probably hear more about as details unfold. And now, onto one of the more controversial stories of the week. Easily the most debated development in numismatics, at least for this week, and it's still unfolding. On March the 19th, the Commission of Fine Arts approved a design for a proposed 24-karat gold commemorative coin featuring President Donald Trump, tied to the 2026 Semiquincentennial. The design included a portrait of President Trump on the obverse, with liberty and the dual dates of 1776 to 2026, while the reverse shows a bald eagle in flight. So from a strict design standpoint, it follows fairly traditional US numismatic themes. Where things become more complex is that another advisory body, the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee, or CCAC, declined to review the design altogether. The reasoning cited was a long-standing tradition where US coins have generally not depicted sitting presidents or living persons. At the same time, Treasury officials stated that the committee had multiple opportunities to review the design but chose not to participate. state, and emphasizing that final authority ultimately rests with the Secretary of the Treasury. So right now, we have one advisory body approving the design, another declining to review it altogether, and the final approval still pending at the Treasury level. There are also ongoing discussions around legislation and the possibility of legal challenges, so this is not finalized yet. The key details, like denominations, size and pricing, also haven't been announced yet. So for now, this remains very much a developing story, and one that could set important precedents depending on how it moves forward. Now, this next story feels like something straight out of an archaeological thriller, but it's very real. Authorities in the West Bank have intercepted a group of ancient coins at a checkpoint, and the details suggest that this could have been part of a much larger smuggling operation. The coins reportedly include Revolt-era shekels and Bar Kokhba period pieces, which are some of the most historically significant and heavily targeted coins in ancient Judean numismatics. So these aren't just collectible, they're the kind of artifacts that are often tied directly to major historical events. Where this becomes more serious is where authorities believe that coins may have been obtained through illegal metal detecting and looting of archaeological sites. And that's the major issue, because once artifacts are removed without proper excavation, a lot of their historical context is lost permanently. Right now, the coins are being authenticated and investigated to trace their origin and how they moved through the chain of custody. So this, too, is still developing, but it highlights the ongoing challenges of protecting historical material in the field. And to wrap things up on a lighter note, if you happen to find yourself in the Midwest, there's a new exhibit worth checking out. The Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City's Money Museum has opened a new exhibit called Minted in History, which explores how currency designs have evolved over time. It's running through to the end of 2026, and the museum itself is free to visit, so it's one of the more accessible stops if you're into numismatics. Definitely a nice reminder that coins aren't just collectibles, they're a part of a much bigger story. If you enjoyed this week's update, make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss out on the next one. And if you've missed last week's episode, then you can check it out right here next. For the World Numismatic News, I am Numisman saying thank you for watching, keep collecting, and have a fantastic day.